One of the most exhausting problem projects Marvel has dealt with in recent years has been the Blade reboot with Mahershala Ali. It's one of those rare cases where everything around the movie feels like a chain of bad luck. The project has gone through 6 directors. The release date has been delayed so many times, fans stopped counting, and by the end of 2025, Marvel still hasn't given a real release window, a start date for filming, or even a clear idea of what direction the story is taking. What makes it worse is the situation with Mahershala Ali himself. A few years back, there were rumors that he wasn't happy with the script and might walk away over creative disagreements. Later, insiders claimed he was just tired of waiting and could shift his focus to other projects. And that's the part that hits hardest. When the one person who was locked into the movie from day one starts losing interest, you can't help but wonder what state the project is in. The closest the movie ever got to real production was under Bassam Tariq and Jan de Mange. Both were literally on the edge of finally starting the shoot, but every time they were ready to go, something knocked the whole thing over. First the pandemic, then the Hollywood strikes, then another round of budget and schedule reshuffling inside Marvel. At some point, it started to feel like the studio just had no room for Blade in its already overloaded lineup, and Kevin Feige treated it almost like a side quest, constantly giving priority to other characters and franchises. Every now and then, there were rumors that Marvel might move Blade off the big screen and turn it into a Disney Plus series in the spirit of Daredevil or Moon Knight, but that idea never got official confirmation. Back in 2023, Marvel television reps like Brad Winderbaum were talking about a new supernatural era on the horizon, filled with darker heroes, mystical stories, and a more mature tone. It felt like Marvel was laying the foundation for a separate supernatural branch, and Blade was supposed to be the centerpiece of that entire mythology. The projects from that period totally supported that direction. Werewolf by Night, even as a small special, was an important step toward horror. Moon Knight proved that supernatural characters could exist naturally inside the MCU, especially with all the comic history behind him, and his potential ties to teams like the Midnight Suns. And of course, the biggest moment was Ali's voice cameo in the Eternals post-credits scene, hinting at a connection with Kit Harington's Black Knight, and teasing the Ebony Blade storyline. At that point, it really felt like Marvel was slowly steering the audience toward a full-on supernatural team-up and a darker corner of the universe. Expectations were huge. Fans were ready for the rise of the Black Knight arc, the logical introduction of Ghost Rider, the formation of the Midnight Suns, and a whole streak of darker stories in the MCU. It could have been the most exciting direction Marvel had taken since the early phases, and that's why everything surrounding Blade feels like one of Marvel's biggest missed opportunities in years, especially with projects like Thunderbolts falling far short of what people hoped for. Judging by the mood in the fan community, by polls, by the comments from even the most loyal Marvel diehards, the picture is pretty clear. Thunderbolts, the team Marvel kept trying to frame as the next big Avengers-style lineup without any real reason, feels completely unnecessary to a lot of people. There's no hype, no spark of originality, and the whole thing comes off more like a filler project than a natural continuation of the universe. Fans keep saying the same thing: drop Thunderbolts from the release slate and put those resources where they actually matter, like a Midnight Suns movie or Blade, because those are the stories that could hit hard and push the MCU into a fresh direction. Blade especially, if it had landed on time and in the right tone, could have easily outperformed Thunderbolts and left a much bigger impact on the entire structure of the saga. Darker characters, supernatural arcs, horror elements, all the stuff Marvel is seriously lacking right now. These heroes could have played a huge part in setting up Secret Wars, in building the next Avengers lineup, or simply bringing some fresh energy after this long stretch of comedy-leaning projects. But they never got their moment in the spotlight. The core problem of this new MCU era is that Marvel still hasn't introduced any truly bold or meaningful new heroes. The universe is leaning on nostalgia, and that can only work for so long. The original Avengers are gone story-wise, and their returns feel more like cameos than the start of something new. And if you look at the next wave of characters, who's actually capable of carrying massive blockbusters? Ms. Marvel, Kate Bishop, America Chavez? They don't just feel secondary, they feel buried in fourth-tier territory. Marvel tries to push them in the comics with solo runs and flashy covers, but audience interest doesn't magically grow from that. Right now, the only young hero who feels like a big deal is Spider-Man, but everyone knows the catch. Even though he's part of the MCU, Sony owns him. They can take exclusive control of Tom Holland and the character's story anytime they want. That's not the kind of foundation Marvel can build a long-term plan on. And when you look strictly at the characters Marvel Studios fully controls, the list of genuinely promising heroes gets even smaller. Blade is one of the few who perfectly fits the darker tone the studio desperately needs. The character has history, iconic status, mainstream recognition, and massive potential for a supernatural arc. Plus, the market hasn't seen a real vampire blockbuster in ages, something with that classic early 2000s vibe blended with modern visuals and storytelling. Blade could have been that comeback. A sharp, mature, stylish reinvention of the genre. And Marvel had the perfect actor for it in Mahershala Ali. That's why it's so hard to understand how the studio still hasn't managed to get this movie off the ground. At this point, everything suggests Blade won't make it to screens until after Secret Wars, if it even happens at all. And if the delays keep piling up, there's a real risk that Ali, worn out by years of waiting, might just walk away unless Marvel gives him a paycheck and creative freedom too good to refuse. But for now, it really feels like the project is sitting at the very bottom of Marvel's priority list, and that's exactly what frustrates fans the most. Over the years, Blade burned through multiple writers, and not just minor rewrites. 2 full script versions reportedly made it all the way to Marvel's final approval stage before collapsing. The first officially attached writer was Beau DeMayo, the guy behind Moon Knight and X-Men 97. But eventually, he was removed from the project, and long before that, insiders were already whispering that Mahershala Ali wasn't exactly thrilled with his draft. According to those reports, DeMayo leaned heavily into non-stop action, while Ali wanted something with more weight, deeper character work, richer emotional grounding. There were also rumors that DeMayo had no intention of showing Blade's origin or his transformation. He introduced him as a fully formed vampire hunter, a daywalker with a reputation already built. Ali, if you believe the same sources, pushed for the opposite, for the film to explore the beginnings, the inner struggle, the journey that shapes him into who he becomes. Whether that's accurate or not is hard to say, but what we do know is this. After DeMayo's departure, his material was handed to Michael Starbury for a full rewrite. And that's exactly where the project hit another wall. Starbury's draft ended up being weaker than the original. Marvel rejected it, partly because he completely cut Kit Harington's Black Knight. In early plans, that character was supposed to serve as a key supporting role that tied the story into the wider MCU. Starbury just removed that connective tissue entirely, leaving the movie fully centered on Blade. And honestly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Blade can absolutely carry a standalone film. But Marvel wasn't looking for a standalone. They wanted something integrated, a piece of a bigger puzzle, not a movie floating outside the main storyline. That's when the studio brought in Nic Pizzolatto, the author of True Detective, and for a moment fans got their hopes up, a guy who specializes in dark vibes, psychological depth, moral decay, perfect match. But right when he joined, Hollywood's strikes kicked off, freezing everything. Pizzolatto still managed to finish a draft, and Marvel actually approved it. Yet insiders again claimed that Mahershala Ali wasn't happy with this version either. It created this weird loop. Marvel signs off, Ali hesitates. Ali likes one direction, Marvel pushes for another. Even Pizzolatto's draft, the one currently considered the most final, couldn't launch the movie into production. But out of all the scripts, Pizzolatto's take sounded the most unique. According to industry descriptions, it was a dark psychological thriller with slasher energy reminiscent of early 2000s genre staples. The story zoomed in on Blade's fractured state, a half-vampire caught between instinct and lingering human memories. Think Ghost in the Shell vibes, identity crisis, body-mind disconnection, existential tension. Those themes were baked into the core of the script. The setting was unusual too. Instead of New York or LA, the movie was set in a fictional European megacity with cyberpunk influences. Neon-drenched streets, dense architecture, the sense of a decaying high-tech society. It lined up perfectly with Marvel's early scouting for filming locations in the UK, France, and Hungary. They weren't just moving production for convenience, they were deliberately shifting the tone away from Marvel's typical American backdrop. The film also put a major spotlight on Blade's daughter, Brielle Brooks. Rumors about her involvement have been around since 2019, and they weren't just speculation. She was reportedly the emotional anchor of the story, not a side character but a core part of the narrative, which makes total sense for a psychological thriller. But then came the detail that annoyed a lot of fans: the rating. Despite all the whispers about a potential R, Marvel's version was planned from the start as PG-13. Even in Pizzolato's darker draft, the violence never crossed into truly adult territory. The horror stayed atmospheric, suggestive, never explicit. So right now, this version, with all its contradictions and all its potential, is the one insiders describe most clearly. But the bottom line hasn't changed. Blade still isn't moving into active production. Even after years of rewrites, a prestige actor waiting in limbo, and multiple attempts to lock down a final script, the project remains stuck in uncertainty, no matter how promising it once looked. This whole saga lines up with another leak, one that's pretty intriguing. Marvel supposedly reached out to Michael Green, the same guy who co-wrote Blade Runner 2049 for Denis Villeneuve. That actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Green isn't just a master of neo-noir sci-fi, he's also a solid adapter, the kind of writer who can take existing material and turn it into a tight, structured script. His track record speaks for itself. Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, plenty of other projects where the script clearly outshines the direction. In the industry, he's considered reliable, even if he doesn't always get the credit he deserves. Insiders say Green managed to finally assemble a working version of Blade, fixing the mistakes of all the previous drafts. His take reportedly won over both Marvel and Mahershala Ali. He kept the psychological depth, preserved the darker tone, and leaned into the Blade Runner-inspired details. A new European city with a slight cyberpunk edge, neo-noir atmosphere, and even a detective thriller vibe. He also brought back characters who had been coming and going in earlier drafts. Black Knight, played by Kit Harington, and Elsa Bloodstone made it into his version. Green's script also subtly set up the possibility of forming the Midnight Suns. It wasn't spelled out on screen, but the tone, the villain choices, and the structure all hinted at it. Early discussions about the antagonist ranged from Mephisto, who had a cameo in Ironheart that never went anywhere, to the classic Lilith. And here's a juicy detail. Some reports say Lilith was actually offered to Mia Goth, with rumors of a secret casting floating around for a while. In Green's interpretation, Lilith wasn't the ultimate boss of the whole story, but more of an arch-enemy figure, someone who could become a major threat specifically for the Midnight Suns team. Blade's main solo villain was supposed to be another character Marvel is still keeping under wraps. Lilith, according to insiders, was hunting Blade's daughter. Her blood could serve as a key, either to heal Lilith or to help her create an army of nearly immortal beings. This version also brought in the Ebony Blade. The weapon, which first appeared in the post-credits scene of Eternals, was apparently Lilith's, and meant to be her main artifact. Even with all these strong elements, the project ran into another wall. Green's finished script was reportedly approved by the studio, but Marvel had already started reshaping its plans for the next few years. And that's where a second conceptual path comes in, an alternative route for Blade that could seriously change his role in the MCU. After Deadpool and Wolverine smashed it at the box office, Ryan Reynolds openly suggested that Marvel could revisit Wesley Snipes. He pitched the idea of a kind of soft tribute, a dark, noir, adult Blade movie in the vein of Logan, but within the Marvel universe. And honestly, that's not crazy. Marvel could totally explore this route today. Snipes has repeatedly said Blade is the role of his life, and that he's still the one true embodiment of the character. There's even a subtle invitation in his words. If the studio wants a darker, more mature, atmospheric take, he's ready. It could actually work, especially if they brought in an adult Blade daughter, like in some comic runs, where their relationship drives the central drama. That pairing, an older hunter and his heir, fits perfectly with a later, more intimate film where emotions take center stage. From Marvel's perspective, it's understandable. Lately, the studio has leaned heavily on nostalgia and bringing back familiar faces. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but the strategy is clear. Recognizable actors are a kind of elixir, and by that logic, Blade with Snipes, in a standalone adult story where the old trilogy is canon but doesn't weigh down the new narrative, is exactly the kind of option Marvel might at least discuss behind closed doors. Snipes is literally itching to return. He said he's ready to play Blade again, solo in the Avengers or as part of a full reboot. His enthusiasm enthusiasm is huge, and the only real hurdles are budget, studio decisions, and Marvel's willingness to risk a full course correction. Right now, Blade's trajectory is rough. The Mahershala Ali project is stuck in endless rewrites, director changes, and the actor is reportedly growing tired of waiting. So it's not out of the question that Marvel might just hit reset. Keep the good ideas, toss the rest, and make a new film in the spirit of Logan. Intimate, dark, built around the father-daughter dynamic, with a budget around 80 to 100 million, no sterile corporate gloss, and a focus on character. That approach would open the door to a soft reboot where the story continues, but on a new level. More honest, more adult, more emotional. And maybe, finally, that's the version of Blade that drags the character out of the production hell he's been stuck in for years.